Okay, this is Block 9, the Liberal Establishment, Section 3, the Great Society, with the section, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. This is the third of Johnson's Great Society successes, the big ones. Education funding is 1, Medicare, Medicaid is 2, and the Immigration and Nationality Act is number 3. If you remember, back to Block 5, Americans had restricted immigration in 1924. They had set up a quota that people could only come into the country based on their nationality, as the American ethnic melting pot was set up in the year 1890. That it was set at percentages based on the population of that year. What it ended up actually doing was restricting immigration mostly to Northern and Western Europeans, Germans, Norwegians, British, French, kind of your real old stock Americans. But many Americans, or many Europeans, started to resent that, especially Poles, Italians, Greeks, Portuguese, argued that the American immigration system discriminated against them. That they wanted to, that not that many Germans by 1965 are interested in moving to the United States, but lots of Portuguese are, lots of Poles are, lots of Turks are, lots of Italians still are. And they said that this law is unfair, the law needs to be changed, that American immigration should open itself back up like it had been before 1924. And Johnson and his liberal allies in Congress got passed the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965, which replaced the quota system of 1924. It completely replaced it. There would be no more quota system in the United States in terms of immigration. What it did do, it doubled the amount of visas annually to 290,000. That's starting in 1965, and there was an increase slightly per year that 290,000 visas would be available to immigrants starting in 1965. What its goal, its stated goal, was to attract skilled workers. Scientists from other countries, college students from India who wanted to study in the United States. Its goal is to attract skilled workers. The law has a lot of unintended consequences that, honestly, the authors of the law did not indicate that they really thought this through. One of the policies of this immigration law was what's known as the family unification section. This is something that many of you are possibly familiar with. If you were a legal immigrant, if you were one of those 290,000, you could bring over legally any close family member, spouse, parents, children. And they coming in did not count towards the 290,000. Parents and siblings, parents, children, spouses, and siblings were all given the right to enter the United States to live and work. And starting immediately, over 100,000 people a year took advantage of this particular rule. So now people were starting to come to the United States, not necessarily the people with the skilled jobs, but elderly parents, spouses, their children, younger brothers, younger sisters were being invited in, and these people, took the opportunity to come live in the United States, and they took it up. Although the law was sort of passed with Poles and Greeks and Italians in mind, the sources of immigration from those places never reached vast numbers. But people from other parts of the world took advantage of the immigration law of 1965 and came in and completely changed the demographics of American immigration. And you all know this perfectly well, that the end of the quota system and changing world realities, that people in the rest of the world were getting wealthier, they could actually afford to come to the United States, meant that after 1965, for the first time in American history, most immigration came from non-European sources, mostly from Latin America, as you well know. Since 1965, European immigration to the United States has slowed to a trickle, while immigration from Latin America and Asia has skyrocketed. And just to show how much this has changed the demographics of the United States, let's look at 1965. In 1965, 87% of Americans were white, 12% of Americans were black, and 1% was other. Less than 50 years later, in 2010, only 72% of Americans were white, 12% were black, 14% were Hispanic, and 2% were Asian. This has had vast and far-reaching effects on the ethnic makeup of the United States, the social makeup of the United States, the political makeup of the United States, that the United States is trying to absorb this new group of immigrants, as it has absorbed immigrant groups in the past. We have always done it successfully in the past, and I think we're being pretty successful with it this time around. But the fact remains that after the 1965 law was passed, America became a much less white place, and a much more Latin American Catholic place than it was beforehand. And that has had profound changes. It has had profound changes in the country. It has had especially profound changes in certain states: New York, New Jersey, Florida, California, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico. California now, the largest state of the Union, California, less than half of people who live in California are white. California, there are more blacks and Hispanics combined in California than there are white people. Whether that's good or bad or it doesn't matter is not the point of this lecture. The point of the lecture is that is something new and unique in American history, and it remains to be seen what the consequences of that are going to be. Whether they're completely benign, good, bad, who knows? But it is a fact. I mean, the city of Elizabeth. You know, if you looked at Elizabeth in 1965 and looked at Elizabeth in 2013, there are obviously racial and ethnic massive major differences. And it's changed the outlook, the character of the city of Elizabeth. Not necessarily for bad, not necessarily for good. It just has changed it in a lot of different ways. And all of this is because of this Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965, liberalized American immigration laws, and opened our doors pretty much to anybody who could afford to come. That's legal immigration. We're not even talking about illegal immigration at this point. That's a whole nother issue. Just in terms of legal immigration, legal immigrants changed fundamentally after this law.